So good afternoon. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Today, I should say. Thank you for grabbing lunch, and feel free to grab as much as you like and come back and sit down. So Hadi, Deento, Lahuntsi, Wasainia, diversity circles, innovation, diversity, and industry. KK, Shannon Kelly, Kyla Epstein, and Zader Gamal Joseph Lasuzi, advisor at Aboriginal Services, Claston Nation, Dakelth Territory. We're very happy to have you here today, and welcome to Diversity Circles, which is our Faculty and Staff Association session today, which is focused on diversity, industry, and innovation. I'd like to start by always acknowledging the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. But because we have a member of the Squamish Nation here, Aaron Nelson Moody Splash, we will love to get him to come up and say a few words. Splash is actually not only a Squamish Nation artist and member, he's also a shirt collaborator with our project. So looking at ways that we can get community involved has been a big part of this project. So Splash is here to help us with our welcoming.
Kirsten, no, CMCI, Nate Clinton talks in your college and stuff. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for remembering my name and having me come out. I do come from Squamish Nation, a village called Cheakamus, which is about halfway to Whistler from here in Paradise Valley, if you know that. The Cheakamus, as they say in English, coming down from Whistler down through the Squamish territory. It's been fantastic to work here at the school. And I'll explain a little bit more about some of the work I got to do with Joanne and Za. But I want to share a song with you first. And my dear younger brother here is going to come back me up. We've been teaching him how to make a drum and then teaching him how to use it. And he's a beautiful man with a strong voice, and he always has good things to share. So we're going to get him to back me up a little bit. If we sing really well, maybe we can get Joanne to come dance back up for us as well. I don't think there's anything such thing as an Aboriginal clapping, but I get your intent. There's another way. Normally we think of clapping as when we perform, and usually whenever our elders come in our community, we're actually sharing a bit of our humanity. So we hold up our hands in a gesture I've heard called tsakwam, and it means, usually you see us say OCM or hoichika. It's to reach out as if to embrace, is what the gesture means. So when we share from the heart like that, when we share who we are, because normally we only sing our own songs, it's a gesture of tremendous respect for you and gratitude for being here. That particular song doesn't come from Squamish. It comes from Tsleil-Waututh. We had a very dear elder who worked here for many, many years, and who's one of the coolest guys ever. I don't know how else to explain it. Very, very loving, very, very strict when he had to be, laughing all the time, very poetic, always had beautiful words for us. And we sing that song amongst Coast Salish people so much because his family gave it to Coast Salish people as a kind of an anthem so that we would feel unified in all of the work that we do, in all of our gatherings. We would feel like one people sometimes when we sang that song together. And I asked him what the song was about, because we sing it so many times in so many ways. And he said, we sing in the beginning to remind ourselves, at the beginning of an event, we all come from the same place. First thing every human being hears is their mother's heartbeat. So we try to remind ourselves of our humanity before we do any work together. We just remind ourselves of our humanity with the drum beat from the song to remind us of our mothers. And he said that particular song is to gather all of the goodness around us, all of the strength and all the beauty and all the inspiration, and then do something with it. So he said that song is about gathering all of the goodness and strength and doing something with it. So that's why we sing it so many different ways. He said that's why his family shared it with all the other Coast Salish people. So I was really glad that we don't normally go and question our elders in that way, but I was really glad that I asked the question and that he answered, because sometimes our elders will, if you ask my question, they'll tell you lots of stuff and you're not sure if you got the answer or not. So you keep going back, which I think is their intent, until you start to get so much information you've answered your own question. But I was lucky that time. He actually answered me fairly quickly. It was only an hour or two. Pretty quick response for an elder, actually. To explain just a little bit of who I am, I was given a call by Joanne, who asked me to come help out in the school to create a carving to celebrate the 50 years of BCIT's work here. And we had a couple of very interesting conversations around a bunch of ideas, and we decided on a house post. And for us, kind of like the post dividing the middle of the room, posts hold up the roof of our house. So 4 house posts would represent the family holding up the house of our longhouse, our hielam. And the values and the stories that hold up your house are depicted on those shut, the carvings that we make. So we decided to do that, and I kept thinking about a woman I was very much in love with in my earlier life. We were in a relationship for a long time. A very beautiful person who came to this school, and she wasn't always treated well because she was a woman. And in some of her classes, she didn't have a good experience. And it kept coming back to me that things are much different now. But I kept thinking of her, and I kept thinking about the Aboriginal students here. And I started to think on this house post, I wanted to show something, the respect that Coast Salish men paid to women. So we used a mountain goat horn design. There's a kind of a bracelet that the men here would, they'd go way, way up in the mountains to get a mountain goat. It's really hard to do in the old days. And they bring back these mountain goats, they'd take the horns from the goat and make these beautiful bracelets, and that's also hard. And then they would give them to the women they had tremendous respect for. So we wanted to put up a house post, but also to show some of the respect for the feminine, or for the women, or for that side of ourselves, or for that side of our community. So that's what we put on there. And we had a lot of conversations, and it was funny because we were both dreaming about the same design. And when we had the final conversation, we realized we'd both dreamed of the same vision for that piece. So it comes from a very good place, and it comes from a very invitation from a very strong woman. Joanne is greatly respected in our community, and in her own community and a lot of other places. She's a beautiful person. So when she called, it was an honor to come help her give you something meaningful, and did the very best work I could do out there in the cold all winter, and Za bringing me coffee all the time, and it was it was actually one of the most enjoyable jobs I've ever had. I also got to work on the Diversity Circles logo, which is, again, we would, there's actually, I was telling Za, there's actually no words for this, but we tend to think of the feminine as red and the masculine as black. But my teachings are that everyone is a balance. And we use the analogy of our canoes, which were painted black on the outside. So sometimes we use a bit more, kind of a tougher energy to face the world. And we can't actually go anywhere like that. So the inside of the canoe is painted red. So my teachers have always said we're trying to balance that within ourselves. So my teacher's very strict with me about being both strong on my feminine side and my masculine side, so that I treat the people around me properly. So he said a man who fights with his feminine side treats women badly. So he said it's important that you embrace all sides of myself in order to treat the world properly. And it's depicted on our canoes. The old Salish canoes were painted black and red, the balance between the two. And you can't really journey anywhere without that kind of balance. But in this case, I wanted to add a bit more of the feminine energy, just because I thought that in the past, I know BCITs needed that. As I walked by that big picture outside, there's a bunch of dudes in that picture, and I think it's like one woman. So anyways, this I don't know, this balances thing out, but it was my attempt to try to balance things out and to pay the respects to the very strong women in our communities who are still doing work. As I understand, the panel is primarily female. All those beautiful women who do such beautiful work in our communities. Coast Salish culture has a lot of recognition of the feminine. When Europeans first landed, they saw the men standing out front, and my teachers were very clear that the man standing out front is representing someone else, speaking on someone else's behalf. So we model ourselves after the wolves, the head male and the head female. But they say if you really look closely at it, men will stand up here and talk for a bit. Coast Salish men will stand in ceremony and speak, and then they'll just stop. And then some woman will come whisper in his ear, and then he'll start talking again. So I said, don't get the wrong impression, we're not actually in charge. But thank you for the invitation again today, and I want to share the song and the explanation. I think that's about 8 Aboriginal minutes. And I was promised lunch, so I'm gonna grab some lunch and watch some of the other speakers come up as well. But thank you for the invitation. LCM.
Thank you so much, Splash. And anytime I have the privilege of hearing Splash share, it's a really honoring and important experience, and I can't talk after, so I'm going to show a video and compose myself. So Diversity Circles was founded based on responding to diversity and how diversity is expanding in the communities in general, but also in the post-secondary education landscape specifically.
The Diversity Circles team had the vision to convene an interrelated array of dialogues and workshops aimed in part at generating concrete faculty-specific ideas about catalyzing the great potential embedded in BCIT's growing diversity.
There's all kinds of elements to it. There's elements around the events, there's the workshops, there's the pieces that we write, but really for me it's about the relationships that we build through this process.
I came into this and realizing that we could celebrate these groups using an Indigenous framework. When we think of an Indigenous framework, we think, okay, who am I? That's where we start. What's in your heart? And that's why we're seeking staff and faculty right now to say, what are your gifts? What resonates for you? Eventually, we're going to reach out to students and ask them the same question so we can match those two groups together. And then reaching out to the extended community, the people who are stakeholders to this school, and saying, you know, what are your gifts and how can you be a part of celebrating diversity?
Gifts is looking at really how individuals are holding gifts within themselves that they may or may not have expressed, and providing a safe place to do that. You're then able to find not only similarities with others in a mentor relationship, but also you're able to express, you know, the joy and happiness that comes with that.
My involvement in the logo existed already, and I was asked to add some Coast Salish elements to it. They're part of Coast Salish art, but they don't have specific meanings themselves. But to include those symbols is recognizing local First Nations, is recognizing Indigenous culture.
The diversity circles to me means the many circles we have of relationships within this institution and outside this institution, and how those influence each other.
When we have an opportunity to listen and hear other people speak, they find something like, oh, I have that, or I feel that. We're all connected in a similar goal here.
When we increase understanding of each other, then we can have, you know, a better and more positive relationship. And when we can be more empathetic to each other, we can support each other in doing our best work.
Reaching out to students and meeting their needs, that's what Diversity Circles is about.
I think having diversity is super important, otherwise the institution itself won't be able to move forward and continue its adaptive capacities in being innovative and generating new ideas.
Everyone's different and everyone's got a different way that they want to live in this world, and I think if you can respect that and respect how they want to be living, to me that's diversity. It's giving that space for everyone to be who they want to be.
The success would be that our faculty and our staff feel very comfortable with celebrating diversity, and for our students to see a place for themselves so that they feel comfortable here, they feel welcomed here.
We're going to honor your gifts. And here's the champions that are at this college already who are going to lead the way.
All right, thanks. It was an honor to share that video with you, and I am more composed now. So welcome, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Shannon Kelly, one of the co-creators of Diversity Circles, along with Za, who already said hello. Just before we get to the panel, a couple of quick reminders. If everyone could take a moment right now to put on their "Hello, my name is" tag. I know, it's just one of those things that helps us all feel comfortable at the table and reminds us. That would be fantastic. Also on your table, you will see for a bit later on, there are big sheets like this. This is our form of session evaluation. So instead of the Likert scale, we have a bit more of a flexible evaluation tool. So at some point, if you have something you want to add to this sheet, we have one shared sheet for the table. You don't get your own sheet, but it's just a way of collectively gathering some feedback, some ideas from our audience participants. That would be fantastic. And the final thing I want to remind you is just about the world map. If you look at the back door, you'll see there's a big world map there. And for this world map, this is something that we do at each of our big events like this. We encourage people to place dots on the map, red for self, green for parents, blue for grandparents, just so that we reflect on where we've all come from, and that we all come from different places, and many of us the same places as well. So those are the three practical things I wanted to remind you of. And we're going to move forward to our lightning panel. It's great to have some fabulous speakers here today. And speakers are welcome to stand here like me, or we have the walk around mic if you want to walk around in the zone. We're streaming this event, so somewhere up here is good. No doing calisthenics in the back. The three questions that I asked our speakers to reflect on were, why is industry so excited about diversity? What is industry doing to support and leverage diversity? And how do these trends impact the work we do here at BCIT? And they can choose to reflect on any component of that, or even none. We're honored to have them here in any case. So our first speaker is Kirsten Sutton from SAP. And I just want, as a side note, to say this is her first day back from vacation. So it was very nice of her to agree to this panel and to come. So welcome, Kirsten.
Okay, I was told I have 5 minutes exactly, so in good software form, I'm going to start my little clock here. So thank you so much for inviting me here today. I wanted to do two things in my 5 minutes. So the first thing was to add something to the diversity discussion that I think we all do, but I think it needs to be named, and that is it should always include inclusion when you talk about diversity, and I'll explain why I think that. And second, of course, because we're talking about industry, I certainly want to talk about why diversity matters to us and why inclusion is how we make sure that SAP is successful. So those are my two plans for today. I, too, was very moved by Splash's conversation, especially what you said about how to treat people, and that's really where I wanted to start. I certainly don't look like someone necessarily that's had a diverse background. I probably don't look like someone that's had a lot of diverse experiences, but you just never know, right? I've actually had 27 different jobs in my life. I've worked all over, and that was in the span of 14 years. I've had two very strong different careers. I've been a chef, and I work in software now. I went to an all-girls school, which seems very undiverse, but you would be surprised what diverse things you learn when you're girls, and that's all you get to do is everything, right? I have been in many, many different situations in lots of different countries and speak 6 different languages. But it doesn't really matter, all of those experiences and all the diversity, if you don't decide to do something about it. And that's where the inclusion part comes in. So probably all of you know, you've been around diversity your whole life. There have been people different from you. They think differently. They may look differently. They may act differently. They may know different things. You think about your family. If you have siblings, how different they are from you. You think of your parents. You wonder, how did these two people get together? Because there's no reason they should be together, nor stay together, right? You think about this. I mean, the story about opposites attract. I mean, there's a reason for that. When two people come together who are different, magic happens, right? Much more interesting things happen. And so that's why at SAP we talk about diversity and inclusion as one thing together. We can all see the diversity, and I had a lot of diversity in my life, but it was until I was purposeful about including that knowledge, including those people, and seeking out that stuff purposefully, that actually that diversity is brought to the forefront. That diversity is actually leveraged, and then you get what you really need, which is diverse opinions and more innovation. So always start out with these two things being together. You can recognize diversity, but if you don't include it, you will not get anywhere with it. So we have a diversity and inclusion office at SAP, and we have 4 pillars within that office, and I thought it would be good that we share with you how we approach it at SAP. And so in diversity and inclusion, there are 4 things, one being gender diversity. It's very important to us that women have an equal stake in every fashion within the workplace, that their voices are heard, that their strengths are leveraged, and that we have a way to make sure that the women continue to progress. So we are EDGE certified, which is the first, I don't know if you've heard of it, and I'm not going to remember the acronym now. It's for equal, diversity, gender, something, something like that. It's a certification to show that as a company, we do treat women equally. It looks at the pay equity that we have. It looks at the roles to make sure that women are able to progress at the same level. We have targets in place. I'm not a big fan of targets, but we are a software company, and if you measure it, you likely will move towards something. So we're trying to get 25% women in management by this year, and we're already far past that. So the good news is we've already achieved there. We have special programs for women to make sure that they can advance. So there's a LEAP program to help women move quicker and faster, where they have sponsors in the organization. And so we really focus a lot on gender diversity, one being one of the pillars. Our second pillar is cross-generational intelligence. So we have sometimes 5 different generations now in the workforce. That is a lot of people that didn't usually hang out together during the day, right? On my team, I have people that are in their early 20s. I have people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So I have the gamut on my team, and they're not the same. They bring different elements to it. and especially millennials. Everybody likes to talk about millennials. I actually have a reaction to the millennial theories. I actually don't think that millennials are all that different from baby boomers or Gen Xers. I think everybody wants the same thing. I am a Gen Xer, and I want the world to be a good place, and I also want to have purpose in my job. I also would like to succeed and achieve things, just like they say all millennials do. I think the biggest difference is how people communicate. I believe that the guys that are 20 on my team communicate very differently than the guys that are in their 50s and 60s on my team. They don't like to text. They don't really want to. If you're in the older generation, they haven't adopted the technology in the same way. Doesn't mean they're not using it. You've got to be kidding. Is that 5 minutes? Holy smokes, that went fast. Okay, cross-generational. The third one, just really quickly, I'll go through them because I want to make sure we get through all 4 of them. We have differently abled people. This is the one I'm probably the closest to in my role. We have a program called Autism at Work. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. We've been speaking about it a lot, where we're bringing people on the autism spectrum into software jobs. I can tell you that the talents that people have on the autism spectrum are perfect for software jobs for sure, but I would encourage anybody, anywhere to think about this. Attention to detail, ability to recognize patterns, to work on a repetitive task for long periods of time, that ability to persist through long, long periods of time on things that many who are neurotypical would very quickly tire from. These are things that are really valuable. Also in a structured way, software is structured. They love that kind of predictable nature of software, and therefore it's really great for us. But everybody, and I've challenged many businesses over the past year or so to look at your business. Where do you need that type of talent? Because I guarantee you, these guys are the most productive employees that we have right now, bar none. And it's been amazing bringing them into the organization. And again, not just because we're recognizing their diversity, but we're including those talents in our business, and they're changing how we work. You can't talk in innuendos, and they don't understand sarcasm generally, and so people are much more clear and direct in how they speak. It's changed our culture by having these folks in our organization and embracing them in the way that we do. So I will not bore you with the 4th pillar, and I will move on because I see Corey standing right there. But I did want to say again, diversity is all around you, and it's been around you all this time. You must be purposeful about including it. And if you do, you're going to be able to break through to new innovation. Having everybody think the same way or surrounding yourself with people that like your ideas, you're not going to get a new idea, and you're just going to do the same thing over and over and over again. And in software, the world out there is huge, and everybody can access it. So for us, if we just keep doing what we've done in the past, we're not going to reach the people who need the help and need the software. So I'm sure that's true in many businesses you'll be a part of. So remember, those 2 things, if I got anything across. Diversity means including diverse opinions and diverse people. And in order to get innovation, you have to be able to do that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. It's totally fine. I know 5 minutes goes by so fast, but actually our panelist from Van City unfortunately is ill today, and so it's okay that you took extra time. I do want to mention that Kirsten's colleague Ashley is in the audience, I think. Ashley? Yay! So if you have questions in general about Van City, Ashley is here if you just want to connect with her. I'm going to actually go forward to Dr. Cheryl Staub-French and then come back to Corey, since we had a change in our panel. So welcome, Cheryl.
Hello. Maybe I'll start off by thanking Kirsten for going first and going over, so now I don't have to be the one that's going to be doing that. And now I was told I get 8 minutes, so it's all good now. Well, first let me just say that I'm really humbled and honored to be here. Already, even though we were at the beginning of this event, I feel really inspired and touched by the energy in the room. And so I'm I'm a professor at UBC in the civil engineering department. I'm also the Gold Corps professor for women in engineering. And part of my job as a Gold Corps professor is to increase the number of women entering engineering. And we have a goal at UBC of getting to 50% by 2020. So very ambitious. Over the past 7 years, we've gone from about 18% of the national average to about 30% entering our engineering program. So we've made great strides in recent years. But I have to say that sitting in this room and hearing the amazing welcome by Splash and hearing people talking about balancing the feminine and the masculine, being in the engineering community, I realize just how overwhelming the masculine side of the culture can feel. So it's really nice to feel like I'm in a place that honors both. And one of the messages that really resonated with me is this whole idea of reaching your full potential and really thinking about where your gifts are. And what's interesting for me is I almost left engineering many, many times. And I'm so grateful that I didn't, because now in my new role, I get to be a part of the solution in helping to change the profession. And so what was a challenge has become a gift for me, and now I can bring my gifts to this particular problem. And so it's just a really nice framing for me in terms of thinking about what we're trying to do. So in terms of, I'm going to be speaking specifically kind of about UBC and from the perspective of engineering and really kind of the general perspective of STEM fields. This is where I've been living most of my adult life. And speaking to the industry and the demand or the need for more diversity, it couldn't be more important, or it could be more important, but it's very important to think about how we're addressing the need for more STEM students. And so I really kind of broke this down into sort of sets of threes. And so why is this so important within the STEM fields? The first is just thinking more generally about kind of the earlier messages. We want everyone to reach their full potential. And imagine what we could do if everyone was able to reach their full potential. And I think about maybe the person that's going to figure out how to counteract the effects of climate change. Is that person getting educated? Or the person that can cure cancer, is that person getting educated? So I really think about how can we in the educational sector at UBC really help to think about that more fully and explicitly in the way that we work. The second thing is that in engineering specifically, we have a huge talent pool challenge. So we are looking at a significant labor shortage within the engineering sector, about 100,000 engineers by 2020, additional 100,000 engineers that we need to educate. So we have to be better at reaching out to underrepresented groups. And so that's a really important part of our motivation as well. The last thing is that what's been really great for me in this new role is that I get to learn about all the different research that's going on around diversity, specifically around gender diversity, but around other forms of diversity. And there's some great studies showing that more diverse teams are more innovative, more diverse organizations are better performing. And there's some really great work that I always cite whenever I talk is around diverse teams are smarter. So if you have gender diversity in a team, if you have too many men, it doesn't perform as well. If you have too many women, it doesn't perform well. If you have really good balance, those are the higher performing teams. And so the more that we can incorporate that into our thinking, the stronger we're going to be. So what are we doing about this at UBC? First is that in our role, I'm the director of EngSite, and what EngSite does, it's all about getting youth, and in particular girls, engaged and excited about engineering. And so we do a lot of outreach events. So we're trying to get people in sort of the, all the way through from K to, university, exposed to STEM and giving them more visible pathways to the STEM fields. And the challenge is that, women there's still tremendous bias. And so we do a lot of bias training with teachers and parents and really any, counselors, any of the different people that we can speak to, because bias is still happening and is still kind of discouraging girls from pursuing the STEM fields. The other thing that we do is around teacher training. So we actually have teachers come out to UBC and we do teacher training, both to help them understand about how to educate people in STEM, but also so that they're aware of their own biases as well and how they may be encouraging or discouraging different kinds of students. And then the last thing is around parents. We do a lot of work with parents. Any event we run at UBC, we include parents, and we also try to talk to them about their own biases and how they may be holding their own children back. And then the last thing I'll say is that at UBC, we have a new initiative where we're trying to make sure everyone has a pathway to pursue a STEM field. So we're going to be doing a lot more outreach in the schools, going into rural communities, so that everyone has sort of equal exposure to the STEM fields, and so we can better pull these, sort of underrepresented groups and help to make engineering and STEM a more diverse area and profession. So thank you. I think I'm a minute early.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you. I think that Lisa Talio was called away to deal with another situation. So I'm going to go to Corey, and Corey knows Lisa, and we'll include Lisa in another event. Minerva has a great program called Combining Our Strength, and it's my honor to now introduce Corey.
So I do know Lisa. Thank you for having me. Lisa became a grandma for the second time last night, so I imagine she may be maybe busy with that, or also very tired from what I understand was a late night, because I think she posted about 11-ish last night. So thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. I think these two lovely ladies that went before me may have said a bunch of what I was going to say. But there's no question, this is the topic of the day: unconscious bias, privilege, diversity. Of course, for Indigenous people, in light of the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions and the calls to action, certainly we see industry understanding and institutions recognizing the importance of including Indigenous people, and also, of course, the disparity and the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the areas that we don't want to be. I mean, the reality is Indigenous people are at the negative end of every socioeconomic indicator, no matter what it is. And if you ever, I say this every single time I make that statement, if you ever find an indicator we're at the positive end, please send me an email and say I found one, because it'll be a very exciting day, because in all of my years of teaching, I've never seen an indicator other than the fact that we have at least twice the amount of children as non-Indigenous people have, which in my case is very positive, because I can afford my 4 children. I can afford to feed them, I can afford to clothe them, and I can send them to university, which of course is not the case for a lot of Indigenous people. So the importance of diversity, of course, is exactly what was mentioned, is it's the source of innovation. The more minds and the more heads and the more people with different life experiences, as well as pure lived experiences, the different types of thoughts, the different type of interaction, the different approaches people are going to take to a variety of different issues. So it's an absolute must to have innovation. And of course, innovation is often the result of some kind of catastrophe or some kind of disruption, and that's another trendy word that's out there. Innovation often comes as a result of disruption. But it makes more sense to approach it rather than wait for that disruptive event or that challenge or that lawsuit, perhaps. It makes more sense to bring diversity forward before those things happen. Not only because, and obviously one of the number one reasons is it involves profit. Economically, it's feasible. Economically, it makes more sense to include more people as possible. And as an institution like BCIT and UBC, we're in the business of educating people and providing them with skills and training. And one of the easiest ways to write the social economic indicators for Indigenous people is to have Indigenous people have skills and training. You know, people ask me, in my another life I practice law, and people ask me all the time, well, how do we help Indigenous people? The criminal justice system is racist, it's this, and this, and this, and they go on and on. The easiest thing is to not have our people come in contact with the system in the first place. So if we minimize that contact and they don't actually ever enter the system, then it doesn't matter if the system itself is structured and, well, of course it matters, but you're not going to have that overrepresentation. So then the question is how, and the same with children and family, we're overrepresented in this province by 60 to 70% of the children in care are Indigenous. No one's going to argue that Indigenous people are more criminally inclined or more worse parents than other people. There's something wrong with the system. So how do we prevent that? One of that is that recognition of diversity, whether it's in the institutions, whether it's in post-secondary institution, whether it's in industry, whether it's in government, no matter what. We have to have that diversity. So there's no question diversity is valuable, not only economically, but also in terms of innovation and ideas. It's also in terms of governance. You can't govern a group of people with only half or a fraction of them making the decisions. That doesn't work. We've seen, I'm not a history person or a history instructor, but there's hundreds and hundreds of revolutions and disruptions and things that have happened because of people feeling disempowered and people feeling that their needs and things are not heard. So you have to have that. It goes all the way back to, of course, morally and socially it's the right thing to do, but also legally. We have 4 recognized distinct groups in this country: Aboriginal, disabled, visible minorities, and women. If you look, and people often say to me, well, how do I know if I have a problem? Well, if you look around you and you only see people that look like you, then you know you have a problem. It's not hard. It's not rocket science how to figure this out. And I've had chairs of boards, well, I'm not sure what we're missing. Okay, they all look like you. So we've got to sort that out, right? So it's not, but that's also a part of the privilege and the unconscious bias issues, right? So part of my role, obviously, at BCIT is to bring in those initiatives and to bring in the diversity in terms of Indigenous students. UBC is one of the institutions that certainly has led the way. I know I'm involved in UBC in different ways. They had a goal of having 2,000 by 2000, and they reached that goal and overachieved that goal. And I'm quite certain under Cheryl's leadership, he will achieve that goal as well in terms of STEM and in terms of engineering for women. And let's get some Indigenous women in there as well, which I know you're roping me into helping you with that, which is fantastic. But so there's no question. If you look around and look in your programs, who are your students? Who are your work colleagues? Do they look like you? Do they have similar experiences or not? And these come to everything. So one of the things here, of course, with our HR department, how do we ensure that diversity comes through? How do we ensure that the students are coming to BCIT as well? One of the things that has been evident to me, having come into this role, is Indigenous students, the majority of them come to BCIT in cohorts. They don't come as direct entry students. And we're missing something there, obviously, because our students aren't prepared. The students aren't, or they're not getting selected in the different, some places have changed, like in terms of the Bachelor of Science in Nursing, they've set aside seats now for Indigenous students, but we also have to find those students to get them into our difficult 3-year program instead of 4-year program for Bachelor of Science in Nursing, but it's certainly possible. So why are we not achieving at the same rate as other people? It comes down to, so a couple of things, or I guess, why are we not achieving and what can you do to support that? We're not achieving because of all of the historical biases, the legacy of colonization, discrimination, all of these things that we can go on and talk about, and we have entire courses on them. But it's displaced Aboriginal people, it's marginalized us. We don't have the same access to things that people have, that other Canadians have. And it's a kind of a spectrum now. We used to all be lumped in this group of not having the skills and abilities, but now we have Indigenous people that have achieved in almost every single area and faculty and job that there is in Canada. There's not an Indigenous actuarian yet. That's the only one I haven't found. So let's hope there could be one. But so we have broken the cycles in a lot of ways and are achieving in all of the different areas and all of the different faculties. But the reality is we still face a lot of these hidden things. So one thing that you can do is to be aware of your own privilege, be aware of the privilege, what allowed you to get, why are we all here in this room? I recognize that as an Indigenous woman. I checked 2 of the boxes in the Constitution of 1982's boxes. I'm here because my parents made me be here, basically. I had no choice but to go to university, and that's obviously my privilege in my position, being born to a father who's the youngest of 13, who never had to go to residential school because he was 13, he was 6 in 1951 when they changed the laws and allowed Aboriginal people to move off reserve and not go to residential school. So he didn't go to residential school. So that's the privilege and the fortune and luck that I have. But how do we give that to other people? And it's recognizing in yourself the privilege that you have, what allowed you to be here. And when you look at people, and let's face it, we all make judgments about people, there's no question. And often it just comes down to the fact of basic human need to feel safe and secure, right? You walk into a room, how do you decide who to sit next to? How do you decide who to talk to? Those types of things. So being aware of that, how do you decide who you sit next to? Are you going to be courageous and sit next to somebody that doesn't look like you, or that you may not always, you would maybe likely not ever sit next to? So being aware of your own privilege, what allowed you to be here and sitting where you are, and not applying your values and beliefs that are obviously based off of your lived experience onto others. You have to be very, very aware of that. And as well, unconscious bias is absolutely vital. And it's kind of the buzzword today, but it's great because it's about time that it comes out and people start talking about it, because that comes from the privilege and that comes from that lived experience. And I meet people all the time that say, I'm not biased, I'm not, I support and love everybody. Well, maybe in this room you do, but how do we support that and become aware of our unconscious bias? And again, it's looking around the room to see if people look like you. How do you make decisions? As instructors, you have to remember, and I've heard from instructors quite a few times that often they say, well, the student isn't attending, it's mandatory attendance. That's great, but you have to remember that most Indigenous students, about 8 to 9 out of 10, have children and are a single parent. What if that kid is sick? How do you deal with that? And not to say that non-Indigenous students don't have children that get sick as well, but likely they have different mechanisms and supports to be able to still attend school versus likelihood that the Indigenous student not being able to have that. Or I hear from instructors, well, it's not fair if I do an alternate exam or do a different method of evaluation, but you have to keep, and I didn't know it was a PowerPoint, but you've probably all seen it. I use it quite often, and it says, I call the little guys Charlie. There's three guys trying to watch a baseball game, and some can see the baseball game and some can't see. Then this poor little guy Charlie's actually in a hole under the fence. So that's the unconscious bias and the lack of privilege. So you have to know that all the students that come to you in your classroom are not coming to you equally. They don't have the same access to resources. They don't have the same lived experience. They may be the first person that has ever graduated from high school in their family. They may be the first person to attend post-secondary school. So being aware of those types of differences, they may also be looking after, other family members. They may be the only one that has an income. They may be the only one that's not addicted. And again, I'm not saying Indigenous people are the only ones with these types of issues or these types of challenges. But certainly it's a little bit more in Indigenous communities, and the access to resources or support is often a little bit less than you would find in non-Indigenous communities. Even just the simple act of seeking help. Asking for help can be challenging, right? Unless they see a non-Indigenous, or unless they see an Indigenous face, maybe they won't ask for help. Maybe they're still dealing with their own identity. Maybe they've had negative experiences in the classroom. I've had that, and I'm sure Zah and Joanne has had that as well, where you're seen as the expert. If you're the Indigenous person in the classroom, oh, let's see what Corey thinks about this. Yet I know absolutely nothing about the topic or the province or the issue that they're talking about. So it's being aware of those things. Another thing that I hear from instructors often, and I guess more K-12 teachers, is, well, I'm not Indigenous. I'm uncomfortable teaching this knowledge. Well, then figure it out. There's more than enough resources out there now. And if you don't know, email me. There's more than enough resources out there that if you're reasonably intelligent, I assume, able to search that knowledge and search that information, to be able to figure out that stuff. And plus, also, why are we comfortable, if you're in English or history, why are you comfortable teaching about Romans and Greeks? Mythology, grade 7. My daughter's in grade 7. That's what she's learning right now. Her teacher is not Greek, nor is she Roman. So how come she's comfortable teaching about Greek mythology but not comfortable teaching about Indigenous spirituality? Of course, it has to be done with respect. I guess because the Greek people aren't going to come back and attack her for it, but you have to do it with respect, and you have to acknowledge who you are and acknowledge your experience and that this isn't your experience, but being open to that, it is incredibly important. So I guess I'm almost done, or, okay. I didn't know you're supposed to give me a warning. So I guess, I mean, obviously diversity is important, not only economically, but in terms of governance, in terms of innovation, in terms of being inclusive, in terms of a better experience. You know, again, if we just had only men in this room or just had only women in this room, things would be completely different. And the other biases and the inequities to be aware of, we often talk about the racial and we talk about the gender, but you also have to talk about the economic discrepancies amongst us, the disabilities amongst us, the other location, you know, where they grew up, their, you know, have they traveled? You know, makes a huge difference in somebody and their outlook and their perspective on the world. And I just gave a talk last week to the First Nation, or to the BC campus, BC Open Textbook Conference last week, and one of the things is access to technology. We think at BCIT, I mean, technology is in our name. We think technology is accessible to all Indigenous people. The Government of Canada, or the CRTC, thank you. The CRTC has made it its mission to have 50, or your internet to be at the speed of 50 megabytes per second. Is that correct? See, I don't have my little things. I'm not. This is good. I'm at BCIT, but I'm not really good at technology. So they've mandated 50 megabytes per second as standard across the country. So what we have in British Columbia is they'll say 95% of the First Nations in this country, in this province, have internet, but it's at 2 megabytes per second. It varies between 2 to 5. So the definition of connectivity is also exceptionally challenged in Indigenous communities. And often what they have is the transportation. So they have 95%, the hub or the transportation goes to the First Nations community, but it only goes to the band office. It doesn't go to First Nations homes. It's not there. So how do we get First Nations students to apply to BCIT? What do you tell them? Go online. Well, if you're living in Dease Lake and you have a speed of 2, good luck, right? It's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to save it. You're going to lose it. You're going to get frustrated. So those are the types of things, and those are a lot of the biases that we often think, and that's an example of privilege. I have internet in my home. We all have internet. We get mad if it takes, oh my God, it took 5 seconds. I can't believe it. You get all upset, right? So imagine if it took you 5 minutes. And you also have to know, even in some Indigenous communities, we still have party lines. We don't have radio phones. There's not even telephones. So this whole idea of access to technology and therefore access to the world and access to a variety of knowledge and information, even knowing that as a woman you have a right to X, Y, and Z, and an employer when they're interviewing you, and I look at my HR person over here, has no right to ask you certain questions. Right? How are you going to learn that? If nobody in your family's had a job, how do you know what your rights are to when you're in that job hunt or search, or how to behave in an interview, or how to do those types of things? So, all right. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Corey, and thank you for covering so much, and also for letting us know that Lisa's okay, and hopefully happy grandma. Yeah, I believe it was a family situation was mentioned. Thank you so much. So we're going to have a mini break, and I really, really, really want to encourage people not to leave our seminar at this point. I know that's always tempting to look at your to-do list for today and say now is the time. But we're going to have the interactive portion after the break. Our panelists are staying, and they'll be sitting at the tables with you. And we're going to show a video on unconscious bias. We're going to do some really interesting things. We're going to take the feedback from the audience so that we capture your feedback and your opinion. So please, I encourage you not to leave the seminar. We are going to take a quick 10-minute break so you can refill your plates. If you're not eating anymore, there's a table at the back for your empty plates. but please feel free to eat more. I think there's still some food back there. We have some great guests. Newcomer Employment Support Program from Options Community Services Society is here. Dr. Sanya Boskovich from our Power Engineering Program and Opportunities for Women Engineering is here. CRA is here with great federal jobs opportunities. And also from the BC Electrical Joint Training Committee, Kelly Keenleitner is here. So some great people to visit also on your mini break and after the seminar portion. But for now, I'm unleashing you for 10 minutes. Okay, thank you.
For folks who haven't smelled it yet, there is fresh bannock over on the back table over there, so please help yourself.
No, you. It's not safe. I'm just picking this thing up.
We're going to start to wrap up the food area and then get everyone back to the seats, and we'll start up again.
If we can encourage people to come back to their tables, please, we're going to have a chance for conversation in your groups. Thank you.
What would the world look like if everybody were aware of the stereotypes that they have and the biases that they have? When we talk about unconscious bias, we're basically saying our worldview can actually exert an influence beyond our conscious awareness, and it creates ambiguity.
If you go to an engineer who's built something extremely innovative, and you say, who do you think your user is? This is where I have the most fun. My name is TV Raman, and I led that work on Android accessibility for 3 years. Write down everything that you think you know about your user with respect to abilities, inabilities, special abilities, disabilities. Almost every assumption that you write down on that whiteboard about this is the user I think I'm building for is questionable. Because our various unconscious biases define the boundaries you're unwilling to expand.
These biases, they're the shortcuts that our brain has created so that we can deal with the information that we process every single day.
Right when we see anyone, whether we think about it or not, we are implicitly, automatically making judgments about how warm and competent that person or thing is.
All humans need to make decisions, and so we fill in the blanks because our brains are wired to do that, and we fill in with things we don't know with past experience. Oh, you pattern map to someone I think I should hire, so I'm going to hire you versus this person because they didn't map, because I can't fill in the blank because they don't look like me or they're not from my same background, and so I can't see how they're going to make the jump.
Every single person is great at things that you may not expect them to be, but it's really hard for us to see that when we're so powerfully guided by the things we expect to be true in the world.
I grew up surrounded with this conversation about what you can't do and what you won't be able to do. My name's Enrico, and I'm an autistic software engineer. The first time I go through the performance review process, I was asked for 5 strengths. It was the first time that I had ever been prompted to think in that way about myself, and it was really a life-changing moment for me.
When we are working in our day-to-day jobs, we are still making judgments about the people around us, about the resumes we see, about the employees that we're trying to decide, whether to put them on teams or not.
People are very wedded to the idea that they can perceive something objectively, and statistically they're wrong, but it's hard. You become attached to this idea that you can assess something by looking at it.
These subtle assumptions we make about people can have lasting effects on who we're promoting, who we're hiring, who we're putting in leadership positions. We have the responsibility to understand the assumptions that we make and understand the errors that we make.
But it's not just for the collective good. If you take the time to understand more about this, there are things that you can implement for yourself that'll help you develop as a leader and to do your job even better.
It made me realize how often I have a very strong belief that is simply incorrect. When I look at one of these evaluation situations, the first question is how can I eliminate the sources of potential bias and leave just the data so we can actually make better decisions.
If you're not conscious of the biases that you have, you're just not contributing at the level that you could, and you're not innovating at the level you could, and so your products won't be as good. Your results won't be as good.
When you think outside the box with respect to the assumptions you made about how somebody would use this wonderful thing you built, and when you sort of broaden that perspective as to who you change the world for, you build something even bigger.
Great. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kyla. I'm the Member Engagement Officer with the Faculty and Staff Association, and also get to be the project coordinator for Diversity Circles, which is a great honor. We wanted to show that video because we weren't sure how many of the presenters would pick up on unconscious and implicit bias, and thank you to those who did, which is great. And we also wanted to draw your attention to an article. There's a few newsletters on the table, on your table. There's more here to the side if you want, where one of our staff wrote a piece here about implicit bias and the work that we can do around that. And part of this is also things, it's very what might seem like small things, but the name tags that you have in front of you, or on you hopefully, also here have a place for your gender pronoun. And that is to support the fact that when we see folks, we often assume that we know their gender, and therefore the pronoun that goes with that gender. And so it's important to start to, by design, provide tools for folks so that they can use the gender that is theirs, right? And so that others can use it as well. So just like we share our names on these, we also can share our pronouns as well. If you're unfamiliar with what pronoun options are available for you, you can grab one of us and we can talk about that after and point you to some resources as well. But it's important to use tools like this as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stop talking and we're going to give you some time. But also I'm going to use a bit of facilitator's privilege where I'm going to ask Robert to join that table. And I'm going to ask the two people here to find another table, perhaps right over here, just so that we can make sure the tables are full for discussion. We're going to do two different parts of this. The first thing we're going to do is just have you turn to a person next to you, ideally pairs. So if it doesn't work at your table, just turn to the other table nearest to you just because of time. And I will time keep for you. And we want you to do a sort of a verbal version of the exercise we're doing at the map back there, where you share your name. Also, perhaps it's not on here, but if you'd like to share your pronouns so that folks on the table can know how to refer to you, you can do that as well. And then just talk a bit about how you got to be here today. Azal has asked me to model this. So my name is Kyla. I'm here in Burnaby today by way of my grandparents who left Latvia during the pogroms that were being committed against Jews. They left as small children. Their parents took them to South Africa for a safer life. And then my parents grew up in apartheid-era South Africa and felt like they could not support that government. And so they left and came to Canada via New York to fight against that government and try and be part of bringing apartheid down. And then they had me here in Canada. And so that's how I'm here today. So thank you. Take a couple minutes, and I will give you a switch in 2 minutes, okay? Thank you. If you haven't switched, switch now, please. okay if you can wrap up what you're saying and come back? All right. This is great. I hate doing this. Yeah. Oh, let me just check. Okay, as Robert, my new facilitator, mentor, Robert Dom likes to say, this is the worst part of facilitating. You have to interrupt the conversations. But there will be more. So now what we're going to do is at your tables, we're going to have a conversation again. There is a note taker at each table. If the note takers want to raise their hands, or great. So the note takers are there just to capture things so that, again, like Shannon said, we don't lose all the wonderful things that you're talking about. They will also gently bring you back if you sort of wander off to talking about your weekend or the amazing thing your pet did. So these are the questions we're asking you to focus on. I won't read them because they're up here. And also considering some of the focus areas of this project. In terms of how the conversation can go, there's some guidelines up there on the side there that you can use if you feel like you need them. I should just clarify the last part about don't share what people said. It means don't attribute what people said. So don't say, oh, Jeff said so-and-so. But by all means, go out there and say, oh, we had the most interesting conversation about incorporating gender at BCIT, gender diversity. So just in terms of attributing it to folks who are not in this room. So we're gonna, time-wise, we wanna make sure you have time to visit folks at the marketplace afterwards, and we have some wrap-up stuff. So I'll watch the room and see how conversation is flowing and things like that, but we're probably looking at about 15, 18 minutes or so, and I will definitely give you a warning, okay? So thank you, enjoy. Where's your table? Yes, you are. You're with Peter. Oh, is he? Okay. If he's comfortable. this is your 5-minute warning.
Totally as a team of clones. They're all like him, like to a T. And we were trying to hire somebody new and had him involved in the process. And one of his peers had him involved in the process of interviewing, and he couldn't see fit to the candidate. He couldn't see the candidate that I was interested in at all fitting into the team. Couldn't for the life of him see it. Because she was really personal, because she and his team is 91% but also she just understands her. He was like, absolutely. So I'm going to hire her. She's the one. She's the one. We take a look but it's amazing. He just doesn't see any difference. He really feels like he's taking a culture of team. She will not. She won't.
It's fabulous. It's fabulous. And going down there, I intentionally go to Trump's bars where Trump supports but it's hard. It's so hard. It's hard for them to listen to me.
2 more minutes. Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap up the thought that is being shared and come back. Easily the worst part of this job, stopping conversation. So, just a few things. Thank you for participating in this and sharing your thoughts. Like we said, we will pull the notes all together and we will get them posted in some pretty format. So the next thing we want to ask you to do before we wrap up is you should have in front of you a little piece of paper, a quarter sheet piece of paper, where I'm going to ask you just to take a minute silently and write something down, or if something really doesn't come to you, you can take this away with you. And this is for you to take home, to stick up on your bulletin board at work or wherever makes sense for you, just to be a reminder of what you took away from today and what you can do, something action related that you can do to support diversity and inclusion in your workplace. So just take a minute to do that, and then I will tell you what's next. There's even colorful markers on your table if you want to use those. All right, so write that commitment. I will, whatever it is that you'll do. And then take that with you. So before we actually get to this, I just want to share, Shannon and Zaw have not even seen this yet. Sometime during this event, our website went live. I got a message from our tech folks. So diversitycircles.com is now online. You will forgive all the technical glitches that I'm sure we will find over the next couple days. Feel free to email me about them all and I will get them fixed. But I did want to bring attention, Splash has left, but I just wanted to say that Splash gave us permission to use the artwork that he adapted the logo for as the navigation menu. So this is the navigation that we have here. And you can scroll through it all and find out, see things, links to videos, resources. This is just sort of the basic content we had available to load into the site this past week, and we will continue to add things to the site. But the videos from all of our past events, if you haven't been to them, are on there, and you can sign up to get more emails and do all the fun web things. So we want to thank you for your time. We know how valuable it is. We want to thank you for your contributions. I really, really want to encourage folks to do a couple things before they leave. One is to eat bannock, because that's a lot of bannock over there. And also to take time to visit the tables at the back. The folks that are at the back have also been very generous there with their time and coming today. So chat with them about their work and share a bit about your work as well. And thank you. We have the room for a while, so please continue conversations and feel free to reach out to us. And also just if you want to scroll any thoughts on these feedback forms, that would be great. Thank you so much.